and welcome to FPL Mate, your best mate for fantasy Premier League content for the 2023-24 season. My name is Dan and it's time for our Game Week 35 tier list video where we're going to rank some of the most popular transfers of the game week. Guys, if you do enjoy this one, make sure you do drop a like, do subscribe if you're new around here. Let's get started. So, as always, we have got the 30 most popular transfers in at time of recording, and we're going to put them in categories depending on how good they are as transfers in for this game week, how high you should be prioritizing them as transfers into your FPL team this game week. Guys, remember, it is the most popular players at time of recording. If a player is not on this list, it's not because I'm ignoring them, it's because the overall FPL player base might be ignoring them. So do feel free to let me know if there's any names we don't cover today that you would like me to have a little bit of a discussion in the comment section about where they might go, which category. So we're going to start off with Brennan Johnson, a player who has been in my team so far this season. I'm going to put him at least in optional, maybe even a good transfer. And the reason is Johnson actually has some of the best underlying attacking numbers of any Spurs player at the moment, actually doing slightly better than Son in terms of those numbers. Now, obviously, Son is a better finisher, more clinical, and is also going to be on penalties as well. Son much more nailed on, but Johnson is quite a little bit more, well, cheaper, to be fair. Half the price you're going to pay for him, and you do get these double game weeks. The one issue is if Richarlison comes back into this Spurs team, what is that going to mean for Brennan Johnson? Is he going to start seeing him with less game time? We have seen him, in fairness, get results from the bench, but I don't think you've got as much guarantee with minutes as with Johnson as you may have with certain other players in the Spurs team. But still, a good transfer, a nice differential at under 1% ownership, and could do pretty well given his price tag. Next up, De Bruyne. I'm going to put him in the optional category. I think minutes are always going to be a concern with De Bruyne at the moment, with a lot of fixtures coming for the end of the season for Manchester City. Obviously, they're still in the FA Cup, so they may have to save some players for the final after the Game Week 38. Up until then, we'll see what happens, because this week we've got a fixture for Man City, just going to be a couple of days after their Game Week 34 fixture, which is going to be in the midweek. So just be aware of that one. De Bruyne rotation against Nottingham Forest in Game Week 35 is possible, but if he does play, we know he's very good. Got a double game week coming up. And to be fair, City's fixture is pretty decent in general. Solanke's going to be our first avoid of today's video. Now, I don't think he's a bad player to own necessarily, but this is a video about making transfers in. And would I be transferring in Solanke at this moment if I didn't have him already? And the answer is probably no. I'm on a wild card. Solanke's not really in my thinking at all. I think the fixtures are a little bit tougher towards the end of the season for Bournemouth. And I think there's just better options out there right now, particularly as there's no double game week for Solanke between now and the end of the season. Now, Maddison is going to go similar position to Johnson. I think slightly lower. He's a bit more expensive, possibly more nailed on, but we've seen Maddison getting substituted quite early in games. So there is maybe a suspicion that Johnson could possibly be more nailed on than Maddison at this present moment. And I think Maddison's form just hasn't quite been there at the moment, but he is a very streaky player, and if he can get back into the right moment in his football, then he definitely could be a really nice player to own. The two double game weeks over the next 3 game weeks are going to be very, very nice for any Spurs player. So he's got to be in the good transfer category. But I think Johnson just edges it for me if you want to go for someone a little bit riskier, higher risk, higher reward, which I think Johnson probably is at this moment. Garnacho, definitely an option. I'm going to put him in good transfer category. I think we do probably need to prioritize those Chelsea and Spurs players this game week in general. But Garnacho is still a very, very decent pick at 5 million and a perfect cheap enabler for your FPL team, allowing you to spend your budget in other positions, unlike Wissa, who I probably wouldn't go near, to be honest. Like, I think maybe when Tony comes back, there's going to be a little bit more rotation for Wissa. That's going to happen at some point. I do like the look of Brentford's fixtures, but no double game weeks, and the fact he is not a long-term kind of pick. We don't have that much of the season left to go. We don't have that many transfers left to go. I'm not sure I'd be using one to bring in Wissa, to be honest. Dubravka, he's fine. He's fine. Nice 4.2 million, cheap kind of goalkeeper. Nice fixture this week against Sheffield United. Hopefully you're going to be able to get a clean sheet. We've seen Newcastle's defence really, really improving recently, right at the perfect time for when we want to start bringing in their players. So yeah, definitely an option that you could potentially go for. Erling Haaland is now probably at this moment maybe an optional. I don't think we can put him too high, to be honest, because of that potential injury. And I don't want to tell you exactly what's going on because I don't know. Nobody knows right now. But what I can tell you is that Erling Haaland's family members and friends, they have kind of removed Haaland from their team over the past, the past game week, or either benched him, put him third on their bench. A lot of people have put him third on their bench, which does suggest to me that maybe Haaland is actually, the injury is more significant than we thought. So I would wait for more information. Let's see what happens for the Brighton game on Thursday, if Haaland is included in the squad, if there's any updates from Pep Guardiola, and going through to the press conferences for Game Week 35, whether we can get more information, because I'm not sure I would want to be going for him at this exact moment. He's quite expensive as well, not been in an amazing form this second half of the season either, so maybe at this exact moment, there's other places to go. Romero, is that another place you could go? Possibly, but possibly not. Now, let's be totally honest, we love the double game weeks for Spurs, but do we like their defense in general? Probably not. I'm going to put Romero here just because he does score occasionally this season, so you do get a tiny amount of attacking threat from him, but certainly not enough for me to really justify bringing him in at 5.1 million. I just don't think there's enough there. I think in general, the Spurs defense this double game week could be a bit of a trap, because you have to remember, Spurs are going to be playing Spurs and Chelsea, or Arsenal and Chelsea, sorry, and both those teams more than capable of scoring goals. Spurs, not really a team for clean sheets anyway. Do we want to be going in on a Spurs defender that doesn't give us very much attacking threat? Probably not. Edison, quite like him. We're going to put him straight in the good transfer category. One of my favourite kind of goalkeepers to go for at this moment. I think if you want to go for a Manchester City defender and you just want the nailed-on minutes, Edison is the solution to that problem. A little expensive at 5.5 million, but the fixtures in general are good for the rest of the season for Man City, plus that double game week in 37. I think he's a good transfer. Definitely a player to consider. Van der Ven, I'm not sure I'd go for him. 4.4 million is a nice price tag, and we do have double game weeks, but again, are we going to get, genuinely speaking, are we going to get more, even in a double game week, from Spurs defenders with very little attacking threat compared to, some of the other defenses in and around the Premier League at the moment, who can get clean sheets, who have better fixtures, who are more consistent with their defense? I'm not sure Van der Ven is the one. I'm not sure Reguilon is the one either. We're going to drop him down into this category. Yeah, he could do okay over the next couple of game weeks, but just not where I'd be looking to spend my transfers. Dan Burn, I think he's a really interesting transfer. I think he's probably a pretty good transfer. I would put him up here. I think I'd rather go for a Dan Burn at 4.5 million than Van der Ven. I think Newcastle are a better defence. They're an improving defence. They have a great fixture in Sheffield United. I think a player like Burn could definitely outscore a player like Van der Ven right now. And Burn, surprisingly, has really good underlying attacking numbers, even better than Fabian Schär, who I know people absolutely love at the moment. So Burn, yeah, really interesting pick. I think if you are looking for that budget defender, he's possibly the player I'd be going for right now. Real top pick. In fact, I'm going to even bump him up, maybe even a little bit higher, maybe slightly above Maddison for this game week. Good chance Burn outscores him. Next, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Is he in a void? Probably at that price tag. Liverpool, real difficult fixtures over the next 3 game weeks. West Ham next is probably the best of the next 3. No double game weeks, difficult fixtures, very high price tag. He's probably still going to deal with a little bit of rotation in the short term. If Trent plays again in the second game of game week 34, I would be worried about him in game week 35. Maybe he's just going to be forced to play through it, but only coming back from injury very recently, I do worry about his minutes just a little bit. So can't really see too many clean sheets over the next 3 for Liverpool. They've been struggling a little bit for clean sheets anyway. Very high price tag. You will get the occasional attacking return from him, but again, I think there's other directions I might want to go with my transfers, particularly players who double right now, such as Petrovic at Chelsea. Like this pick a lot. I think I'm going to put him up here with the likes of Johnson, Burn, Maddison. If you want to make a goalkeeper transfer, Petrovic, definitely a good answer. I think the Chelsea defense slightly better than the Spurs defense, probably. Maybe not too much in it, but I think there are definitely better opportunities with Chelsea as they have stronger fixtures than Spurs do. Spurs have a difficult double game week this week. They face, is it Liverpool in game week 36 as well? And even in their double game week, Manchester City is one of Spurs' 2 fixtures. So I think Spurs, from a defensive point of view, are going to be quite difficult. Whereas Chelsea, I like them a bit more. Better fixtures, same amount of double game weeks, and actually a little bit cheaper as well, those Chelsea defensive assets. So I'm going to put Petrovic all the way up up there in good transfer. Like the look of him. Unlike Vicario, who I guess is kind of the player, kind of like Petrovic. If you're looking for a double game week goalkeeper who has 2 doubles, you're probably going to go for either Petrovic or Vicario. Most of you guys are probably going to be looking at least at one of these goalkeepers. I prefer Petrovic. Yeah, cheaper, better chance of clean sheets, better fixtures. Everything is going the way of Petrovic for me personally. So Vicario, I understand the appeal. I think he is definitely still optional because you can get save points from him potentially. But typically, Vicario has not scored too many points this season. He scored quite well in the early periods of this season. But honestly, how he's up from 5 million to 5.3 million is beyond me because he just has not been scoring well for the last pretty much 4 or 5 months, really. So I don't think that's going to suddenly change, particularly with the difficult fixtures coming up. Now, if I was to go for a Spurs defender or goalkeeper or, a defensive asset, this is where I'd go. Pedro Porro. I think he is possibly a great transfer, but the fact that Spurs probably can't have great transfers, I don't think, in the defensive positions. But I'm going to put him here. Yeah, I'm going to put him alongside Brennan Johnson. We'll put him in good transfer, very high good transfer as well. 2 double game weeks coming up, much more attacking threat than any of his other defensive compatriots, I guess. And we've got no Udogie now as well. Udogie out for the rest of the season, which means if you are going to go for a wing back, Pedro Porro is possibly the solution. Now, on Udogie, very quickly, there's 2 possible solutions to that left back position for Spurs. It's either going to be Davies or it's going to be Emerson playing on that left-hand side. Now, either case, Pedro Porro is going to have more license to get forward because they're slightly more defensive defenders than Udogie. But I don't think right now anyone can say with certainty if it's going to be Davies or Emerson getting the most amount of game time on that left-hand side. So Pedro Porro, I think, has been improved by Udogie's injury, and therefore I would be very strongly consider going for him as long as he is fit. From what I know right now, it looks like he is going to be available, but we'll obviously update you guys as the week goes on. Guardiola. I like him a lot as well. Another defender I really, really like. I would definitely try and have at least one of Guardiola and Edison in your team. I'm going to probably put Guardiola slightly higher. The only difficulty is there's probably more defensive options than there are goalkeeper options right now, and therefore you might choose to pick Edison over Guardiola. But Guardiola, I think, is doing fantastically, doing well for bonus points. He is, charging up the field a lot as well and getting those attacking opportunities, and seems reasonably nailed on as far as a Man City defender can be, but we have to acknowledge in general Man City defenders are all rotation risk. It's very, very difficult to pick for them. But if you had to pick a Man City defender right now, Guardiola would be the play I'd go for. 4.9 million is a pretty decent price tag as well, I should add. Onana is going to be optional this game week. I think longer term, he's definitely a goalkeeper we'd look for the double game week, but I don't think he is a must-buy now. For right this second, Vicario would be probably the player you would prefer. If you wanted to go for, if you're on a wild card and you need 2 goalkeepers, at that point, you probably do look at someone like Onana as a backup to someone like Petrovic or Vicario this week. But right this second, I think Onana can probably wait. I don't think you have to buy him quite yet. As we know, Manchester United looking pretty shaky defensively at the moment, and therefore it might not be the best time to invest in them until they can start to get things figured out a little bit. We put Dalot in a similar situation as well. Not really a priority transfer in this game week. I think the points potential is limited compared to the Chelsea and the Spurs players, for example, and even the Newcastle players. I would all rate these ahead of Manchester United assets right now. They're okay players to own, definitely wildcard considerations, but not players I'd rush to buy using transfers alone. Next up is a player who is essential. First must buy of the video is Cole Palmer. No doubt about that. He has to go in that top category. Probably your captain option for this game week as well. Quick bit of news on Palmer, actually. Apparently he has been ill this game week and hasn't trained as of yet at time of recording. But as we get closer to the game week 35 deadline, I've got no doubt he's going to be absolutely fine and ready and raring to go, trying to chase down that golden boot in his double game week against Aston Villa, who, like I say, I always say Aston Villa capable of conceding goals. We saw Solanke score against them so far in game week 34, and yes, Spurs are the other opposition. I think there's goals in here for Palmer. I think he's a really, really nice pick for this game week. A must-buy, essential captain option as well. Amazing pick. Next up, Ollie Watkins, who, given his form, given his ability, given how great he is an FPL asset, I think he has to go in at least optional. But I would prefer to go for some double game week players this game week. If I'm totally honest, yeah, I wouldn't. Watkins would not be a priority transfer for me. If you already have him, great. See how you get on. I think Aston Villa's fixtures in general do get a little bit worse. There's no real standout great fixtures for Ollie Watkins between now and the end of the season. I appreciate he got a couple of returns against Bournemouth. That was probably his best fixture in the final 5 game weeks of the season. It's not going to get too much better. He's got a tough game in that double game week. I would say if you are free hitting in game week 37, Ollie Watkins is definitely more on the menu for you. But outside of that, an optional transfer, no higher than that. Bringing us next to Bruno Fernandes. It's a player I quite like. Yeah, I quite like this pick. I think he's got to go for at least good transfer. Maybe let's put him like here. So around Dan Burn, Guardiola kind of levels of transfer. Yeah, on penalties, finding some decent form for himself for this Manchester United team who, despite their defensive struggles, seem to still be ticking along quite nicely in attack with plenty to play for towards the end of the season. And Bruno Fernandes is definitely a decent inclusion for your team who also has a double game week in 37. So let's see what he can cook up at home against Burnley. Moving on into the double game week, he's definitely going to be a really popular pick. If you can afford to go for a Fernandes rather than a Garnacho, I think it's definitely worth the investment. But Garnacho is also a great option for the Manchester United boys. Which brings us to Phil Foden. Is he a great transfer? I guess it depends on his minutes against Brighton. But Foden has been another amazing FPL asset this season. You know, you definitely put him in the same category. I know Foden has kind of been going under the radar a little bit more than an Ollie Watkins, for example, but I definitely put them in similar categories as players who have just been great assets all season. Now, Foden is a little bit more hit and miss. He either goes nuclear or maybe he just kind of fizzles out. But at this stage of the season, we need to have those nuclear players because if they do go big, they can have the ability to turn your season around for the good or for the bad. And I think Foden, with great fixtures for Manchester City, starting off with Forest, moving on to a nice double game week in 37 as well, it's just going to be a really important player to own. Particularly now we've got kind of Haaland. We're not sure about him right now with his injury situation. De Bruyne is always going to be a little bit rotation risk. Foden's been pretty nailed on this season outside of those periods where he's had an insane amount of games to play, or, you know, like with the Real Madrid Champions League games, or when he's had minor injuries. Now, right now, he's fine. He's fit. He's available. And therefore, hopefully, he's going to be playing the majority of games between now and the end of the season. You've got to kind of bet that from game week 35 onwards, Man City play 5 fixtures. You've got to bet that Foden is going to play at least 4 of those. And if he's playing, that is half the battle with him, and you've got a real opportunity to score big points. Next up, Malo Gusto. Malo Gusto is, for me, if he is available and playing every game, he is, you know, almost a must-buy. I mean, what an amazing asset to own. The problem is, he has struggled to play 2 games per week a little bit this season and has been protected a lot. In addition to that, we have got information that he has potentially picked up an injury in the FA Cup, and therefore I would be a little bit more cautious about him. Again, we have to kind of consider at this moment, because we are a little bit worried about Gusto's injury situation, you shouldn't be rushing to buy him right now. And actually, I think Petrovic is probably the safer investment into the Chelsea defence, assuming you don't want to double up there. If you did want to double up, Petrovic, Gusto, probably the ideal partnership. But right now, I'm worried about Gusto and his availability, whether he is even going to be available to play both games in the double game week. And if he's not going to play the 2 games in the double game week, well, he may as well not have a double game week, and therefore you may as well go for a player like Burn, who has a great single game week instead. Speaking of Burn and the Newcastle defence, Fabian Schär, I'm going to put alongside Burn. I think, you know, similar kind of a situation between these 2 players. Schär has been more consistent in actual real-life FPL returns and goals and assists. Burn has slightly better attacking numbers, but at the end of the day, the real numbers are what counts. That's what you get FPL points for. Now, the big difference in price does put me off Fabian Schär a little bit. But if you can afford to go for him and you just would rather have a player who you know is scoring points rather than a player who looks to have the potential to score points, then probably go for Schär over Burn. I would also consider Trippier as a very, very nice differential for the end of the season if it looks like he's going to be available in the near future. But both of these picks are really, really nice ones to go for. I would try and at least have one of them going into that double game week in a couple of weeks' time. And given that we've got Sheffield United at home next for Newcastle, you know, you may even want to consider going for these guys now. Here is a player who I think you guys are not going to like, because we already spoke about him in yesterday's video where I showed you my wildcard draft as it currently is for Game Week 35. And of course, we knew there would be some comments, but Nicholas Jackson for me He's a great transfer. I'm sorry, he is. I really like him for the double game week. Yeah, like I say, I look at these fixtures, Aston Villa and Spurs. I think there's goals here. I think there's opportunities to counter-attack against both of these teams. And I think Nicholas Jackson is definitely a player who, whilst may not always have the best finishing, he's proven time and time again this season that if he gets enough counter-attacking opportunities, how well can he do? I mean, the last time one of the last times, he's actually scored quite high on a few game weeks this season. I think people have watched a few games of Jackson and actually ignored a lot of the games where he's actually done reasonably well and scored FPL points as well. He's not been as bad as people are making him out to be. And one of the times where he did go nuclear, and he has gone nuclear this season, was against Spurs. But of course, Spurs did have the 2 red cards in that game, but the high line of Spurs was something that Jackson was able to exploit very, very well. And I think Aston Villa, again, another team that play with a fairly high line, and Jackson is going to be able to get in behind. And if he can combine well with Palmer in the forward positions, there's going to be FPL points on offer. So we've got a player who I think has 2 fixtures that really suit him. A double game week immediately, another double game week in game week 37. So you've got the double there. And with the people looking for new forwards, particularly maybe slightly cheaper, 6.8 million for Jackson seems like an absolute bargain. And I'm sorry, guys, for me, he's a great transfer. You can argue with me as much as you like about that one. I'm not budging. Well, maybe you can convince me, but I doubt it. I like this pick. I really do. Really, really like him. You know, if you've already got Palmer, you want to add to your Chelsea attack, this is the way to do it as far as I'm concerned. But there still are some other players who I would rate very highly, possibly even above him, such as Gordon. Gordon, love him for this game week. Sheffield United at home, we know how well Gordon does at home in those home fixtures. 6.1 million, nice price there, nice value for money. Great pick. Definitely, the cheap midfielder to go for. If you've already got a Palmer, you're looking for another cheap midfielder, Gordon is definitely the guy to go for there. Heung-min Son, would rate him above Gordon as well. Is he a must-buy with the double-double? I mean, maybe, yeah. I think Palmer's slightly above Son at this moment, but the fact that Son actually specializes in those games against the best teams, he's like a giant killer kind of player who does really well. Again, another counter-attacking type player. And even though Spurs do have difficult fixtures coming up, they suit him. They really, really suit him. I mean, we've got, for example, this game week, we've got Spurs against Arsenal. Son loves playing against Arsenal and their high line. We've got Spurs against Chelsea. Probably going to be the most difficult game of the bunch for Son, to be honest. After that, we've got Liverpool, another game that Son can thrive in. After that, the double game week contains Burnley, a team that Son's already done really well against, and Man City, a team that Son always does well against. And then finishing off the season with a presumably already relegated and playing with freedom Sheffield United in game week 38. I think Son is pretty much a must-have for this game week, and I'm sure most of you guys will agree with me. And there's one final player, and it's going to be Isak. Now, I'm kind of on the fence here whether he should be a must-buy or a great transfer, but I am going to put him in great transfer, just below Palmer and Son. And the only thing that is putting me off putting him in that high category is the fact that Wilson is back. Maybe Wilson eats into a few minutes of Isak, and I do worry that maybe with 5 fixtures to go, Isak maybe misses one. I would love it if he plays all of them, particularly if he can play them in the central striker position and be on penalties and continue to be the wonderful player he has been this season. But with Wilson looming, with injuries, a potential, and with double game week, which creates fixture kind of congestion, which Isak is often kind of rested in those highly densely kind of fixture areas, I do worry a tiny bit. But the positives massively outweigh the negatives, and there is not that many negatives. The negatives, in fact, probably not that much of a concern, but still something in the back of your mind that I think separates Isak from a Palmer and Son in terms of those absolutely elite kind of must-buy players, which I think Palmer and Son are right now, and Isak slightly below that. The fact that he doesn't have a double game week also is a big factor as well. But in general, Isak, phenomenal pick to have, and definitely a player I would not want to go into game week 35 without. So get him in your teams if possible, so long as you've sorted out yourself a nice Palmer and a Son first of all. There we go, guys. That is the completed tier list. Let me know what you think, or if there's any other players missing from this list, and we'll talk about them in the comments section. Thank you so much for watching today, guys. If you did enjoy, make sure you do drop a like and do subscribe if you are new around here as well. There's going to be plenty of videos for Game Week 35, particularly as I myself am on a wildcard right now. If you want to check out my first wildcard draft, feel free to check it out over here. I've left a link there for you guys to have a look and see what my team is saying. I think it's looking pretty good so far, but yeah, might be a few surprises in there. But guys, aside from that, thank you so much for watching once again, and I will see you later, mates. Bye-bye.